Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, 25-year serial tech entrepreneur, author, and CEO of Sonatify Technology. Today, we are joined by Chris B. out of Seattle, Washington, a top fractional CTO who's been an industry veteran on both the product and the engineering side, been through startup companies, through massive growth companies, up to $2 billion mergers. Chris is now fractional CTO at numerous companies. Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Yes, great to be here.
All right. Walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Sure. I'll give you a quick overview here. Finished graduate school way back when and moved out west here. I was originally born and raised in the Philadelphia area. Came out west here and worked at Microsoft as a product manager, and then Amazon as a development leader and product manager there. I moved on to Uber, worked there pre-IPO, and helped lead a lot of the growth initiatives for Uber for Business, which is a lot of fun.
Those are all great brand names that you got your stripes at.
a few that people probably heard of. Yeah, really great companies and learned a ton. They were really formative years during that time when I was really learning the software industry and kind of how things are done at scale and how things are done, at least one right way. There's no one right way to do things, but there are a few right ways. And a lot of those bigger successful companies have figured out big pieces of it that are really useful to take to other places. And since then, I moved back up here to Seattle. I worked at Zillow. I led the core shopping division at Zillow, so product and engineering there for Zillow.com. And then I went on to be CTO of a startup called Lesson. And we went from an early seed stage valuation all the way up to a multi-billion-dollar merger, which was quite a wild ride. Raised a couple $100 million venture capital and grew a big team there. Had over 100 people reporting into me at one point, and that was a lot of fun. And since that merger, since that kind of exit scenario for me, I've been doing fractional work, and I've worked at a number of early stage startups in the last couple of years, and I'm working on a project of my own as well, which has been a lot of fun working on with a couple partners.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's start with your advisory work. So you're working with early stage companies. Tell us more about what you do there, how you provide value.
Yeah, the advisory roles are usually less of a time commitment. They're usually a couple hours a month where I'm helping them both on the architecture and sort of technical side, but then also on the people, kind of team management, organizational design, hiring side. And then also helping, of course, with product direction, overall strategy, kind of thinking through their place in the market. And that's been a lot of fun.
Let me ask you, Chris. So
yeah.
How do you be effective with these early stage companies providing a couple hours a month of support? That doesn't sound like much.
Yeah, on the advisory side, it's usually more strategic, and they'll come to me as needed. Like I'll do interviews sometimes to help people out, or I will advise on some very specific people management situation they may be dealing with. If there is a bigger technical decision, depending on who the founder is, some founders I work with are very technical, they're engineers, and some are not. They're very much business people. So depending on their needs, I will help them out more from like an advice and sort of sounding board perspective, by and large. And it's a lower commitment though, the advisory work.
So at what point do you think a startup says, I need to find a fractional CTO? Like, what are those trigger points that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of companies that are in that kind of pre-seed, seed, maybe going to Series A range, tend to need a technical leader, but often aren't funded in such a way that they're going to be able to typically attract, a top-notch CTO or VP Eng that is coming from a big technical company or coming from a, real deep background. Not to say they can't and they don't. Definitely great people end up at early stage companies as well. But the fractional is kind of a nice in between because you can often find folks that are a little bit more experienced and really great for the role, but because of the fractional arrangement, they're much more willing, and this is certainly my story, much more willing to work with companies that maybe I wouldn't want to work with full-time necessarily, and also gives you an opportunity to sort of try before you buy on both sides, right? So I think people enjoy that aspect of it. And to be honest, in an early stage company, you don't necessarily need a full-time CTO or full-time head engineering. There often isn't enough for somebody like that to do in an early stage, unless they're a co-founder and, really helping run the company. Just somebody hired, usually there's not enough in those early days to even keep somebody busy.
Now tell us, one of your clients is Goodroutes. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so Goodroutes is a Proptech company up here in the Northwest, and it's created this really innovative rent-to-own solution that has been getting a lot of traction out there. And we're working on building an AI-powered SaaS platform for property management, which has been a lot of fun. So taking a lot of what I learned in the property management space at Zillow and Lesson and applying that to what's happening to Goodroutes there. And the founder there is fantastic, and I've really enjoyed that relationship there for the last 6 months.
Now, has that product launched yet? What stage is that at?
Yeah, it's out there. We are actively working with leads and potential homeowners. Renters becoming homeowners is the product, and yeah, it's fully live, and the conversion funnel is happening. So we're working through it as we go.
Good deal. Now, you're also the founder of a company called DevPlan. Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. So DevPlan, we are building an AI native set of tools for product development and engineering. The way we like think about it is almost like Cursor for product management. So Cursor is the new AI enabled IDEs, you probably
Yep.
know. So thinking about that with a product management lens, with a big focus on the handoff between product and the engineering side. And specifically, a lot of what we're doing is guiding the AI based IDEs with specific instructions that are going to allow those AI enabled IDEs like Cursor, like Windsurf or Junie from JetBrains, any of those to operate much more efficiently and much more effectively than they would with just somebody trying to prompt it, kind of off the cuff.
Interesting, because we certainly hear a lot about the AI tools that help on the engineering side, but not as many on the
Right.
product side.
Right. Exactly. And so I think there's a big opportunity there that we are just getting started with.
And what stage are you at? Have you guys launched a product yet? What stage are you at with DevPlan?
We are in a private beta. So we have a waiting list, and we've got, about 300 or 400 people that have signed up for that now. So we're gradually letting people in every week, and we're really asking for feedback and input from our beta users, and refining the product based on what we're hearing. So we're still in that early stage, and looking to build a really great product is really our focus.
Chris, I want to be on that beta list. I need your commitment on the air recording that I get to be on that beta list.
I will get you in there, Steve.
All right.
Absolutely.
Good deal. Good deal. So
For sure.
you've led engineering teams at companies large and small. What's your ideal tech stack for you to build things the way you want to take advantage of the most efficiencies? What's your ideal tech stack?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it depends in that answer. It depends a lot on what you're building, and I think as you get to a certain level of seniority, and I see this a lot with principal engineers and architect types that I worked with, you start to care a little less about the specific language and framework, and it's really more about what's the right tool for the job at hand. So, again, I think it depends a lot on what you're building, of course, but if we're just talking about a B2B SaaS app, like a somewhat straightforward application, the next ecosystem that is around a node is really powerful these days and becoming kind of a fan favorite, if you will, or something that's being used very heavily out there. And that's TypeScript, both on the front and back, and React for the front end. Database wise, I love Postgres. I feel like there's a lot of database solutions out there, but you can kind of do everything with Postgres, including storing vector data. I haven't really found a good reason to not use it in most projects. And then, the AI APIs, there's a variety of them, of course, OpenAI and Anthropic being the leading, and Gemini, being right there as well. So that's been really fun to work with those new capabilities inside applications. But if I was building a small B2B app, that's where I would start. But of course, it depends a lot if you're talking about a data pipeline, or if you're talking about an analytics tool, or you're building a CLI, for the local machine, or if you're building embedded software, all different decisions depending on what it is, of course.
Gotcha. Now, so as a fractional CTO and advisor, you're seeing a lot of startups. What are you seeing over the past year? We've kind of been an interesting ride in tech, to say the least. Things were really depressed. There was some optimism around a new president coming in, and then the tariffs kind of blew everything out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing in the startup world, and what kind of challenges they're facing?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple of things. I guess I would answer on kind of the business side, and then maybe on the people side, or kind of the expectation side. Business climate wise, I mean, I think the bar to get started is higher than it's ever been, and I think that is driven in part by AI. In terms of having workable product, having MVP, even having customers, and before you'd want to go out and try and raise a round, or try and go the funding route at all. So I think that it's made the ability to build something much easier. So I think the idea and the go to market part of it become that much more important, and distribution really ends up being in a lot of cases, not exclusively of course, but in a lot of cases, the real differentiator. How can you distribute this product in a way that nobody else could, or how can you get traction in a way that nobody else could? So that's some of the stuff I'm seeing on the business side, at least in the early stages. I think in the
Okay.
later stages, more mature companies, big companies, again, you'll hear me talk about AI a lot on this episode, but I do think there's a significant change there in terms of the expectations from leadership. And we're seeing this with some of the, CEOs, Toby Luke from Shopify. I think the Fiverr CEO just sent out a similar email where, they're very clearly saying, like, we are an AI first company. You need to use AI as the first way to solve a problem before you ask for more headcount, or before you want to spend other money. So that's been an interesting shift. And I think that's going to continue to perpetuate as we continue to move forward here. I don't think there's any stopping that train.
Well, let's dive into that. So AI is
Yeah.
absolutely changing software development, but it's only as good as the leader and the infrastructure they put in for their team to be able to use. And there's some pretty bold claims out there by guys like Zuckerberg saying he's going to get rid of 60% of his engineering team within 5 years.
Yeah.
What's your take on, I know it's changing so rapidly, of the good, bad, and the ugly, and how AI is changing software development?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. Like any big technological change, I think there are phases of adoption, right? There's the classic innovators curve, innovation curve, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards, and we're still in that early adopters phase. I think in general, it's surprising sometimes not how resistant I find engineering teams or engineers to be necessarily, just how kind of unsupportive. It's sort of I tried it, didn't really work. I used it to write a test case, it was okay, I could do it better myself, sort of thing. And it's like, well, I think a combination of things. It's sort of, well, keep trying, iterate a little bit there, because I think once you hit that unlock moment of seeing what AI could do, and I'm talking specifically about code writing right now, once you start to see that, it's really hard to go back, honestly. And I think one of the missing pieces there, honestly, is really clear instructions and a really clear breakdown for the LMs to be able to execute efficiently. Sorry, shameless plug, but that is what we're solving with DevPlan, is creating that specific set of instructions to be able to execute in a much more efficient way.
Well, that's what all LLMs, it's only as good as the prompt engineering or the instructions that you're giving it. And that's really where you need to be educated to get the most out of it.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I think at the bare minimum, things like writing boilerplate, writing test cases, converting ideas into tasks, if you're giving solid input into whatever the task is at hand, and the output is also expected to be text, LLMs are going to do generally a good job with that. And that's really where they shine. But I think there's also a mindset shift around what kind of work needs to be done in a lot of cases. And what I think is really magical, kind of more on the product or business side, is instead of having to burn the amount of time that it typically used to require to, say, generate a high quality PRD, or generate a first draft of a strategy, or compare different ideas, allowing just the foundation models out of the box, honestly, but any LLM to give you that starting point, so you have something to react to. And I think the mindset shift is we become a little more of editors and reviewers and decision makers, the human input into this equation, as opposed to the creators in a lot of cases. When I say creators, I mean writing text, like that part now with good inputs is able to be created and gives us a lot of optionality, a lot of things to think about, to where we're still in the driver's seat. We're making decisions. We own the outcome, but you can just get there a lot more quickly and get a lot more considerations presented to you very, very, very quickly. So that's what I think is changing inside organizations, and that's been interesting to see.
How do you recommend that leaders go about educating engineers how to make the most of it?
Yeah, I think specifically as it relates to engineers, I think really understanding what the capabilities of these tools are, and what they aren't. I think there's kind of this whole vibe coding trend that I think it's kind of given what the AI tools can do a bad name in some ways, because they're great, by the way, for prototyping, and
Yes.
I stand behind
But
that.
you
I
want to
think,
scale that off something that's vibe
yeah,
coded, that could be
that's
a dead end.
that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. I mean, to be fair, you can certainly create a scaffold of an application in a lot of the apps, Lovable or Bolt.new. You can generate something and then bring it in to Git and then bring it into an IDE and work with it there. And it'll do an okay job at scaffolding that. But that's not that much different than finding a template, which have been around forever, of whatever framework you want to use. Kind of a batteries included template that somebody created. But once you get past that initial sort of, one shot, oh my God, kind of moment, which it is impressive. I mean,
Mhm.
you type in a reasonable idea, and the fact that it can generate something that actually works is remarkable, and it's only going to get better. But in no way is that a production scale application that's secure and that's scalable, that is organized the way you want, that is easy to modify and add things to. So that's great for prototyping, those type of tools. But then the other class of tools that are the AI enabled IDEs, like the Cursors and Windsurfs and JetBrains Junis of the world, like those, that is a different realm, and that does have a place in professional software development.
Well, and I see a lot of engineers who will say, well, my company won't let us use those things or won't invest in it. And I'm always telling them, hey, look, on your own time, you need to be using
Yeah,
those. They're pretty cheap. Windsurf,
yeah,
you can is $20 a month. I
right.
mean, it's not a big investment, and it's critical for engineers to stay on top of this stuff, even if their companies aren't.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And even if you save, the most conservative amount of time imaginable, an hour a month, that's worth $20, right? And that's sometimes the math that people have to look at it through. But
Well, I hope
yeah,
they
I mean,
value
once,
their time more than $20 an hour, but hey.
but at the absolute minimum, I mean, it's hard to argue against the cost, I guess, is what I'm saying.
So you're a guy that's been around large and small teams at companies of all sizes. What's one of the brutal lessons you wish you would have learned earlier in your career that you know now?
Yeah, brutal lesson. I think there's a couple that I would probably mention. I would say one that comes to mind is you can't outsource clarity. I like at Lesson, for example, I had a lot of really smart people, and had a great team there, and had what I thought were pretty clear goals. But that doesn't always mean great execution at every layer of the organization, right? And especially in large orgs, as you get into kind of that middle layer, there's a lot of ambiguity, handoffs. Context that's lost, and a lot of that causes damage, right? Because it may have been clear at the leadership level, and you may have some very capable people that are executing, but in the middle, things can sometimes get a little lost in translation. And I think aligning the team and really over communicating the goals and the strategy is really important, because once you get people rowing in the same direction, you really can get out of the way as a leader and let magical things happen. But it requires alignment from the top to the bottom on not only priorities but also principles, how you go about doing the work. When I was at Amazon, I think they do this the best, arguably, in tech. I mean, I haven't worked everywhere, but certainly famous for their leadership principles, and they're embodied at every level of the organization, whether you're interviewing, whether you're giving feedback, whether you're reviewing a document. Every place in the organization, they're embodied. That really creates a specific culture that has certain expectations. That's a really valuable thing. So I think that's the biggest thing is clarity.
Gotcha. So a fractional CTO role is a desirable thing that I hear a lot of CTOs would love to do. What
Hmm.
advice would you have of red flags on projects you shouldn't take as a fractional CTO?
Okay. Yeah, I think if you sense that there are a lot of problems that you're going to need to come in and unpack, and it's going to require a lot of people management skill, or I shouldn't say skill, but people management time, where you're really coming in to fix kind of bad organizational dynamics, or people not getting along, or potentially bad hires that may have been made, or people aren't good fit for the organizations. It's not that can't be done in a fractional capacity. It can, I think, but depending on how fractional the role is too. A lot of my engagements are only like 10 or 15 hours a week. But if you're doing a full like 20, 30 hours a week, maybe that's fine. But if you're truly doing a fractional, it can be hard to really have the impact you'd want to have there, and be trusted in a way that you can drive the kind of change that might be needed if that's the kind of situation you're being brought into, which is often not the case. But in the case that it is, I think that's something that you watch out for.
No, that's good advice. If you're going into that type of fire, you have to make sure you have the right authority to fix it.
Right.
To say the
Exactly.
least. Chris, thanks for getting uncensored with us today. Any final shout outs or advice for tech leaders you'd like to give?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, what would I say? Final advice. Leadership maybe isn't about stepping back. It's about stepping in at the right time. And I've always thought about the role in leadership to be a bit of a surveying role in a lot of scenarios where, you're looking for opportunities to help, you're looking for opportunities to jump in and provide value, but ultimately you want to empower your teams. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years too, is the more you can empower your teams and the more autonomy you can give them, the higher the engagement's going to be, the better results you're going to get. People are just generally going to do their best work when they feel like they have true ownership of what they're doing. And that's something I really try and embody with every team that I manage.
Excellent. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. Stay bold and keep building.